concept that is. But all right, guys, other big news we get to running back updates. First of all, Andy Reid giving Isiah Pacheco a good bit of hype, Chris. I mean, he was actually asked about his third down role because Jerick McKinnon's still a free agent. And Andy Reid, pretty specifically called out Pacheco, saying that he's ready to be able to do all that. He's good with the protections. He's good with the technique and fundamentals. He can run on the routes. He's got great hands. Clyde can do that. We've got guys that can step in there and do it. So maybe a little bit of cold water on Deneric Prince. But when you do start looking more at Isiah Pacheco, Chris, I mean, he's kind of been shafted outside the top 10 RBs. Again, not like he's going that late in drafts. You're still someone, you need to spend the third or fourth round pick on him. But if we just had to sit there and go, okay, who's more likely to get a true 3-down role between Isiah Pacheco, Kyren Williams, and Derrick Henry? I kind of think it's Pacheco. And then when you go, okay, well, how good are the offenses? They're all pretty freaking great. So, Chris, I mean, at what point do we say maybe Isiah Pacheco should be going ahead of guys like Kyren Williams and Derrick Henry? Or am I reading too much into freaking August coach speak over here?
No. Leave his price where it's at, man. Like, we don't need to be pushing him farther up into the like earlier parts, like the third round. Like, keep that fourth round price tag. Let's keep that same energy we've had over the most of the offseason, and like I don't have to pay the premium, because the way that I'm thinking about it, and this is the way that most folks should be looking at these things, like once they get into some of their managed leagues and their drafts throughout the season, is that you're not just taking a singular player. You're taking a player within a tier of other guys and who they can be compared with relative to their workloads. And so if we're having this debate over which workload is better or who can have this type of workload, and some of the guys you named are guys that you can probably put into the same tier, whether it's Kyren Williams, whether it's Derrick Henry, whether it's Isiah Pacheco, whether it's Travis Etienne. I mean, all of those guys qualitatively would sound like they're going to be the lead rusher, like for each of their respective franchises. They at least have some involvement in the passing game, whether it's a bit more for a guy could be like for Pacheco, assuming Jerick McKinnon is going to come back. We know that Clyde isn't going to be like a massive part of like the passing game. He might mix in for some third downs, but at least for each one of those guys, we can say that they all have like the same type of workload, like early down, some 2-minute stuff, some passing work and whatever. And like all of them are attached to fairly good offenses, whether it's the Rams, whether it's the Ravens, like whether it's the Chiefs and so on and so forth. So like all those guys, they can be drafted into here, but their costs aren't the same, right? Like Kyren Williams on Underdog Fantasy, typically going in like the third round. Derrick Henry, because of everybody's hype around him, going in like the third-ish round. But then Isiah Pacheco kind of falls like a little bit behind them. You can get him like closer to the fourth round. And so that's where I'm like looking at the player, but I'm also looking at the tier that he falls in. And Pacheco falls behind because we have looked at the fact that they've had other guys like mix in. And when it was Jerick McKinnon there, like he was mixing in and like the goal line, 2-minute, third down. But now without it, like his workload isn't that dissimilar from the other guys that are going 6, 7, almost like a round ahead of him. So I would prefer he stay right there, but qualitatively, or even like from a quantitative standpoint, we know the workloads aren't that different. So there should be some justification to start kicking him up, assuming we're not going to get some sort of news that, the Schefter bomb on like this coming Friday of like Jerick McKinnon re-signing with the Chiefs and all that other stuff.
But if everything stays the same, Chris, shut your mouth.
You're the one that's talking about moving him up into the third round. Like I just want to keep him here, but as long as we don't get that news that something's changing about the personnel in Kansas City, I think Pacheco should belong with the rest of those guys in the third-ish round.
ESPN, Yahoo, we're already seeing Pacheco going round 2 right alongside those guys. But yeah, as Chris said, over an Underdog a bit cheaper. And then even over at Sleeper, pick 31 right now. I mean, when we talk about favorite draft strategies, and Chris and I have really been on the same page in terms of a hero RB, when the board does fall the way we're hoping, being one of the premier strategies, if not the premier, method this year, I do think Pacheco is certainly one of those guys in round 2, or preferably, obviously, round 3, where you can then again build your running back room around him, have your hero set up, and then again really just wait the next 5-6 rounds, load up everywhere else, and then get into the RB2 range when appropriate in round 7 or round 8. So Pacheco, over these past 2 seasons, I know he runs like the ground's taking everything he's ever worked for, guys. It's not the prettiest running style in the world. If Nick Chubb's the most pure runner, you can make an argument Pacheco is the most impure runner out there, but still 14th and 9th in next gen stats, rushing yards over expected per carry, and he's caught 75 of his 82 career targets out there. So Not saying he's got the same, high ADOT, kind of difficulty as a CMC, but yeah, that's the single highest completion rate of any player with 150 plus targets over these past 2 seasons. Certainly seems like he's being set up to have, that fantasy kind of game breaking Kareem Hunt role that we saw a couple years ago. So good stuff there. And then, yeah, just more of a quick update, real quick. Panthers running back Jonathan Brooks actually will not likely be available until week 3 or 4 of the regular season. So again, we kind of already expected this. We were hopeful maybe he'd be ready to go, and he could be. Head coach Dave Canales didn't rule out that Brooks could be active before weeks 3 or 4, but basically saying that, yeah, with Breece Hall and everything, like the Breece Hall kind of method of last year, like they're gonna ramp him up even if he is active in weeks 1 or 2. Probably not gonna be someone we can actively rely on, overly rely on, I should say, in fantasy land. So look, Brooks, this has been more than baked into his ADP already. He's still going, as a borderline RB2 around that RB24 spot in drafts. So just realize, if you are going hero RB, maybe not the best bet to be, your RB2 early on. Or if he is, then yeah, maybe take a long look at Chuba Hubbard going way later in drafts because he is going to have some early season upside with, God forbid Brooks, does take a few extra weeks to get going. Maybe the Chuba era lasts a bit longer. So keep an eye on that situation. But again, not just, fall back or just not terrible news for Jonathan Brooks, just kind of clarifying what we kind of already knew there. So, all right, guys, last big news item. Chris, what would fantasy be if we didn't break